Welcome everybody to the annual Ramana Maharshi birthday live stream, which would be his 146th birthday today. Thank you all very much for being here with me. I hope you are all safe and sound wherever you may be. We will dive deep into Bhagavan's own abidance in the Atman, the undifferentiated state of consciousness, which I will explore from his most cherished scripture, the Ribhu Gita. Now, this version of the Ribhu Gita I have is the Sanskrit translation. We actually looked at this last year in his live stream. There is a great Tamil translation of the Ribhu Gita, which I also have, but I want to go to this version of the Ribhu Gita, the ancient Sanskrit, to explore Bhagavan's own abidance in the self, or the Atman, if you will. So I hope you are all safe and sound, and please let me know where you're coming from. We will get to questions after my monologue, so make sure you've got some good questions. We'll take a little break. I'll show you a blast from the past, and then we'll get into the questions. But first, I will get into the deeper teachings of the Ribhu Gita and Bhagavan's self-abiding meditation. So keep that in mind. Keep the comments coming. Please let me know where you are coming from, and think of some good questions for when we open it up for the Q&A. And so when we talk about the Ribhu Gita, right, when we talk about the Ribhu Gita and we talk about Hinduism or Sanatana Dharma in general, the question arises whether the world is real or unreal. And so you've got many different philosophies looking at this in Hinduism. So many different perspectives. You've got the Advaita Vedanta perspective, the non-dual perspective. You've got the Vaita perspective, the dualist perspective. You've got the qualified non-dualist perspective, the Vashishta perspective. And so you've got different schools that look at it in different ways. And so, for example, yoga and Sankhya would be considered a dualist schools, right? A strict dualism between the self and the world around us, right? Where Advaita would look at it differently, in the sense that they would say that the world is unreal. Advaita would. So we'll get into that as well. And so we have to look at two fundamental axioms when we look at this perspective, right? There are two fundamental axioms in Hinduism which explore the nature of reality like no other. Now, these axioms are Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, right? Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya and Brahma Satyam Jagat Satyam. Now, the first one, Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, basically means Brahman alone is real. The world is an appearance. Now, keep that in mind, an appearance. Some people say an illusion, right? But it's not illusion per se. We're thinking about appearance. Now, the second one is Brahma Satyam Jagat Satyam, which means Brahman alone is real. The world is also real, right? And so the first axiom is what mainly the Advaita Vedantins follow, Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya. Now, this alludes to that the world is unreal to a certain extent, right? Think of the snake and rope analogy. And so where all that really exists is a rope, but we project onto the world and we think it is a snake, right? And so then we think the world is a certain way according to our conditioning. Now, this is where we got to get into the Sanskrit Maya, which I'll talk about before. Now, I'm setting all this up before we get into Bhagavan's meditation. But then when we look at Brahma Satyam Jagat Satyam, this is kind of what more of the Vashishtavaitas, the qualified non-dualists, would follow, and the Trika system in Kashmir. So the Kashmir Shaivas, they would follow this. Now, a lot of people will argue between either or, right? Because if we look at Brahma Satyam Jagat Satyam, then that's where you take in everything, right? The world is also Shakti, is the energy of Shiva. So we're not saying that the world is unreal per se from the Kashmir Shiva perspective. But if we look at it from Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, the Advaita Vedanta perspective, then some people believe that the world itself is just pure illusion, right? And I would say that this is an incorrect translation from the Sanskrit Maya, which I'll get into. But we have to think of this in the sense of measurement, which I'll talk about. But remember, it's appearance. It's the snake in the rope, which makes the illusion of the reality of duality, right? And so that's what we're really talking about. And if we look at this, right, Shankara and also Bhagavan had some great insights in the Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya. Now, we're going to focus on Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya today. Brahman alone is real. The world is an appearance. We're not going to explore Brahma Satyam Jagat Satyam because Bhagavan himself was an adherent of the first axiom because he was an Advaita Vedantan, right? And so here we have Shankara and Bhagavan expressing their insight into this first axiom. So Shankara said, Brahman is real, the universe is unreal, and the universe is Brahman. This is basically a word-for-word translation of Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya. This gives you more context. Now, it can be confusing, right? So Bhagavan himself states, he did not stop at the second line because the third explains too. It signifies that the universe is real if perceived as the self, the Atman, and unreal if perceived apart from the self. This is really important to remember as we go further and further into these teachings, right? It's unreal when we perceive it apart from the Atman, right? But it's real when we see the Atman itself. The universe is Brahman. And so when we see the universe as Brahman and we don't see duality anymore, then the universe is real. So it's not really a debate about whether that the physical matter is an illusion per se. It's about our state of perception. And so we misperceive the world. This is the problem, right? We misperceive the world and we see only duality. We don't see Brahman itself. This is the problem, right? We don't see Brahman itself. And so what both Bhagavan and Shankara are saying here basically is simply Atman is Brahman, right? So the undifferentiated state of Atman is the ultimate reality of Brahman. There is no separation between you and the ultimate. There's only a perception, and you dwell in the illusion of measurement. You live in this subjective conditioned illusion or hypnosis or collective trip, as some people refer to it. And that's the world that we live through. But it itself is an illusion, right? And so we have to remember that always Atman is Brahman. And obviously, you mainstays on the channel hear me talk about this all the time, right? And so Atman is Brahman. So this is what perceiving the self in everything means, in others and in yourself and in the world in general. But the problem is Maya and Jiva, right? So as I've said, sometimes there's an incorrect translation of Maya, right? Where Maya is really not just illusion, but we're talking about what I mentioned in Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, where the world is an appearance. Now, the appearance is due to how we measure the reality. We are measuring the reality according to our conditioning, which is between this and white, so forth and so on, right? And so this comes from the jiva, the ego persona system. As we grow as an individual, we are conditioned, and then we see the world through that conditioned lens. So the jiva is constantly measuring, which builds or constructs this illusion of Maya. And what is interesting is when we look at Shiva and we think about Shiva as the destroyer, Shiva should more technically be called the deconstructor, because Shiva deconstructs your subjective reality, what in Sanskrit would be called Brahmanda, right? Your subjective scaffolding that you've built, that you see the world through, right? You live in this little house when all you've got to do is break the walls of this house so you can experience reality as it truly is. And so that's what Maya and Jiva are. So Maya and Jiva are the reason that we misperceive the world. We see the snake in the rope. And Bhagavan used to talk about this all the time, right? He would speak about this all the time to his devotees because they would only see duality while he had an abidance in the Atman. He understood that all is Brahman, and he spoke from that place. And so that's why he was the great Jnani of the 20th century, right? And the problem for each and every one of us is we are so convinced by our subjective reality. We are so convinced about how we measure the world according to our conditioning. We are hypnotized by Jiva and Maya, right? We fundamentally don't know that Atman is Brahman, right? And so Bhagavan knew that, and Bhagavan expressed that to all of his devotees. Now, after Ramana Maharshi's enlightenment, or we could say self-realization at the age of 16, when his name was Venkantaramanaya, right? And after his enlightenment, he hitched all his way to the holy city of Tiruvannamalai in the south of India and resided for the rest of his life at the holy mountain of Arunachala. Bhagavan himself didn't really know what that self-realization was about, right? Like he had it, he threw all his clothes away, he donned a loincloth, and that was it for the rest of his days. He never moved 3 kilometers away from Arunachala, right? And so he, like as he abided in the Atman, he abided at, we could say, the feet of Shiva, because Arunachala is considered a manifestation of Shiva. And so he never really knew what that was about. And so this is where I bring in the Ribhu Gita, right? Because this is one of the texts that explained to Bhagavan his own personal self-realization. And so Ramana states, I did not know that there was an essence or impersonal real underlying everything, and that God and I were both identical with it. Later at Tiruvannamalai, as I listened to the Ribhu Gita and other sacred books, I learnt all this and found that they were analyzing and naming what I had felt intuitively without analysis or name. So the Ribhu Gita itself was the text, and other texts actually were the ones that kind of explained Ramana's own self-realization to him. It kind of made sense, right? He had the concepts, he had the information now that gave him a framework to understand what that was, right? Now, we live in a day and age where a lot of people, particularly New Age people, think that they're above text and they're above everything because, you know, they are the superior people. But for honest, sincere spiritual aspirants like yourself, we don't divert from the text. We seek to understand why Ramana recommended this text, right? Why he taught his devotees, not just the Ribhu Gita, but a lot of other texts in general, right? And so we should not steer clear of these texts. We should absorb as much of the great text as possible, so we can continue to deepen our own self-abidance and cultivate ourselves on the path, right? And so now, getting back to the Ribhu Gita and getting back to Bhagavan's own self-abidance, right? His abidance in the Atman, which is Brahman, right? So the Ribhu Gita explains like no other how the world is unreal. It does flip-flop. There may be some seemingly contradictions in the text. I spoke about that actually last year, annual birthday live stream. But we're not going to worry about that today. As I said, we're going to focus on Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya. We're going to focus on how Bhagavan himself experienced reality, right? And so I want to just share with you just a few verses from the Ribhu Gita about the world being unreal. Brahman is indeed Brahman, of the form of awareness. The world is full of consciousness, consciousness alone. The whole world is only unreal. The phenomenal world is all unreal. I alone am is indeed unreal. You alone are is indeed unreal. The modes of mind are unreal. Attributes and their absence are unreal indeed. The whole earth is indeed unreal. Water is always unreal indeed. Indeed, the world and sky are unreal. Light is ever unreal indeed. Air is ever unreal indeed. Even all this is only unreal. Ego and intellect are unreal. The hosts of beings in the world are Brahman only. The entire universe is unreal. All attributes are unreal. All the remaining is unreal. All duality is unreal. Other than the self, there is no world. There is nothing of this non-self ever. Any of this other than the self is unreal. There is no doubt that this is the truth. The truth. There is no happiness apart from the self. There is not a whit apart from the self. There is no refuge other than the self. Remain in the self always. There is nothing anywhere apart from the self. Not a blade of grass is apart from the self. There is not even an iota other than the self. Nowhere there is anything apart from the self. So the Ribhu Gita can be very forceful, as you see with some of the verses. It can even be more repetitive as you go further and further in the text. But the reason for that is because it is a nididhyasana text. It is a text on non-dual meditation, right? Meditating on Brahman itself, on your own Atman, which is Brahman. And so everything in those verses, as I just read, is trying to reinforce in your mind that all is the self, the Atman. Everything is that. And Ribhu himself goes through a form of negation of everything in the text, right? As you see, air is unreal, earth is unreal, even our attributes, right? So when he mentions attributes, we're talking about the qualities, the gunas, when you read it in Sanskrit, right? The gunas are our intrinsic qualities. So you have rajas, tamas, and sattva, right? And so where if you're rajasic, you're passionate, you're active. If you're tamasic, you're inert, you're kind of lazy, so forth and so on. And if you're sattvic, this is kind of a pure state or a pure guna, right? And so those are the three gunas. And Ribhu himself even denies those, right? So he's denying your qualities, he's denying the existence of the earth, and he's taking his disciple in the story of the Ribhu Gita, Nadaga, through this process of negation. Now, if you read it properly, Ribhu is not saying that the world or the earth doesn't exist itself, air doesn't exist itself. It's that when we look at it in a dualistic sense, that's when it loses its reality. When we understand it as the self, when we understand it as the Atman, when we understand everything as Brahman, then you gain this type of holistic consciousness. This is what Jiddu Krishnamurti would call the holarchic thinking, right? So you gain this sense of wholeness, and this becomes your state of consciousness, which is what Bhagavan had, a sense of wholeness, because he understood that all is Brahman itself, right? And so that's the importance of reading the Ribhu Gita. And as I said, Ribhu goes through this whole process of negation, and it takes you into a deep non-dual meditation. And obviously, a lot of us can debate and argue with Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, right? Brahman alone is real and the world is an appearance. And some of us would probably resonate more with Brahma Satyam Jagat Satyam. But just for today, we'll suspend that, right? And, you know, obviously there are philosophical problems with maybe Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, but we want to stick to this teaching, you know, to give Bhagavan's teachings and also his state of consciousness the credit they deserve. So in the Ribhu Gita, they speak about, Ribhu speaks about a great secret, right? And so this great secret is going to build on a type of meditation we're going to go through in a few minutes. But this is the great secret of the Ribhu Gita. I shall reveal the great secret that is more confidential than any secret and hard to attain in the world. All is just Brahman alone. Now, that's what we've been speaking about, right? All is just Brahman alone. But, you know, Ribhu's taken it to an extreme. You know, this is how a sage functions in the world. All is Brahman alone. That's all that truly exists. This idea of duality, your subjective experience, the way that you subjectively see the world through your conditioning and everything like this, this is a subjective and a collective trip, right? And so the great secret, according to Ribhu, is that all is just Brahman alone, right? And so I want us to sort of meditate on this secret teaching for just 5 or 6 minutes, right? I'm going to take you through a few verses of the Ribhu Gita. I'm going to take you through, not just a few verses, I'll take you through like 40 verses of the Ribhu Gita. And I want you to sit back and really listen to this knowledge as Bhagavan would have listened to it from the Swamis in the old days when he first arrived at Arunachala, right? And so I want you to sit back, listen to this chapter. This is chapter 15 of the Ribhu Gita, right? Which goes into the idea that Brahman alone is real. And so sit back and enjoy, and let's try and find that place within ourselves, right? Try and find, it's saying trying to find the Atman is kind of silly, right? Because you already are that. So just rest in your being, abide, listen to these words, see if they have resonance within yourself, right? And so Brahman alone is all this. Brahman alone is not unreal. Brahman alone is all that is heard. All is indeed Brahman only. Brahman alone is the great mystic design. Brahman alone is the fruit of action. Brahman alone is the great aphorism. All is indeed Brahman only. Brahman alone is the whole world. Brahman alone is the sentient and the insentient. Brahman alone is the supreme and the body. All is indeed Brahman only. Brahman alone is said to be the attributes. Brahman alone is I and the projected light. Brahman alone is the supreme Brahman. All is indeed Brahman only. Brahman alone is this object. Brahman alone is that man too. Whatever little there is Brahman alone. All is indeed Brahman only. Brahman alone is the limitless self. Brahman alone is the transcendental happiness. Brahman alone is the supreme knowledge. All is indeed Brahman only. Brahman alone is the ultimate shore. Brahman alone is the triad of cities, states. Brahman alone is the multiplicity. All is indeed Brahman only. Smell is indeed Brahman only. The supreme transcendence is Brahman only. The sense of smell is indeed Brahman only. All is indeed Brahman only. Touch is indeed Brahman only. Sound is indeed Brahman only. Form is indeed Brahman only. All is indeed Brahman alone. The world is indeed Brahman only. The essence is indeed Brahman only. The mind is indeed Brahman only. All is indeed Brahman only. The world that is ever Brahman, and the word you is indeed Brahman only. The word art is Brahman, as in that thou art. Union with Brahman alone is ever. The secretive is indeed Brahman alone. The exterior is Brahman alone. The eternal is indeed Brahman alone. All is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman alone is waters are that, the state of the beginning and end of the world. Brahman alone is the beginning and end of the world. All is indeed Brahman alone. Being and non-being are Brahman only. I am only Brahman. There is no doubt of this. Whatever in the least there is Brahman alone. All is indeed Brahman only. Waking state is all Brahman only. I am the supreme Brahman only. Truth and existence are Brahman only. Brahman alone is said to be the fourth state. Being is Brahman, Brahman alone. Regard for the Guru is Brahman alone. The noble attitude of the disciple is Brahman only. Liberation is indeed Brahman alone. The before and the after are Brahman only. The complete and the ancient is Brahman alone. The direct presence is Brahman alone. All is indeed Brahman alone. Being consciousness bliss, Sat Chit Ananda, is Brahman. Brahman. Brahman is the perfect, the ancient. The direct presence is Brahman alone. All is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman alone is being consciousness bliss, Brahman alone. Joy is Brahman everywhere manifesting as the adorable. The individual exhibiting auspicious tendencies shines as Shiva always. The individual with sinful traits remains to experience hell. Brahman alone shines as the senses. Brahman alone as the objects, and the activity is only Brahman. All is indeed Brahman alone. All joy is only Brahman. Brahman alone is knowledge personified. The operation of Maya is said to be Brahman only. All is indeed Brahman alone. The process of sacrifice is Brahman alone. The heart space is Brahman alone. The essence of liberation is said to be Brahman only. All is indeed Brahman alone. The pure and the impure are only Brahman. The cause of all this is Brahman alone. The affairs of the earth, Brahman alone. All is indeed Brahman alone. The ever-satisfied self is Brahman alone. All the days are Brahman alone. The silent self of the beings is Brahman only. All is indeed Brahman alone. The essential import of the Vedas is only Brahman. Brahman alone is realized through meditation. The accomplishment of all yogas is said to be Brahman only. All is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman appears as diverse forms because of the limiting adjuncts. When this is realized as only an illusion, nothing exists by its own virtue. Brahman alone shines as the world. Brahman alone is as the people also. Brahman alone form. All is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman alone is forms of the divine. Brahman alone is assembly of sages. Brahman alone is of the form of meditation. All is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman alone is absolute and relative knowledge. Brahman alone is the Supreme Lord. Brahman alone is the pure enlightened self. All is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman alone is the highest happiness. Brahman alone is the expanding light of consciousness. Brahman alone is the paramount fulfillment. All is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman alone is the form of sacrifice. Brahman alone is the sacred offering. Brahman alone is the self of the living being. All is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman alone is the whole world. Brahman alone is the guru and disciple. Brahman alone is all the accomplishments. All is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman alone is all the mantras. Brahman alone is all the repetition. Brahman alone is all the actions. All is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman alone is all peacefulness. Brahman alone is the core of heart. Brahman alone is all unitariness. All is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman alone is the state of imperishable. Brahman alone is the characteristic of the imperishable. Brahman alone is of the form of Brahman. All is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman alone is the abode of truth. Brahman alone am I. There is no doubt of this. Brahman alone is the import of the word that. All is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman alone is the import of the word I, and Brahman alone is the Supreme Lord. Brahman alone is the meaning of the word you. All is indeed Brahman alone. Whatever supreme there is Brahman alone. Brahman alone is the ultimate resort. Brahman alone is objective knowledge. All is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman is all. There is no doubt of this. Brahman alone are you, the ever auspicious. Brahman alone is this entire world. All is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman alone is all so attainable. Brahman alone is the self by itself. By itself. As Brahman alone is only bliss, all is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman alone is all, only Brahman. Anything apart from Brahman is ever unreal. Brahman alone is only Brahman. The self, all, is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman alone is the significance of all utterances. Brahman alone is the supreme state. Brahman alone is truth and untruth too. All is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman alone is the one devoid of beginning and end. Brahman alone is the one. There is no doubt of this. Brahman alone is the bliss of consciousness. All is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman alone is the one eternal happiness. Brahman alone is the soul support. Brahman alone is the one supreme Brahman. All is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman alone is consciousness itself and self-abiding. Brahman alone is rid of adjuncts. Brahman alone is the eternal all. All is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman alone is all that is pure. Brahman alone is the ever easily accomplished. Brahman alone is the truth of truths. All is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman alone is happiness, verily happiness. Brahman alone am I, the blissful self. Brahman alone is the ever spoken of. All is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman alone is the complete Brahman. Brahman is the one witness of all. Brahman alone is the lavish abode. All is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman alone is the all-round perfect self. Brahman alone is the undiminishing essence. Brahman alone is the root cause. Brahman alone is the refuge. Brahman alone is the self of all beings. Brahman alone is the embodiment of happiness. Brahman alone is the eternally satisfied self. All is indeed Brahman alone. Brahman alone is the self that is non-dual only. Brahman alone is the space-like Lord. Brahman alone is the joy of heart. All is indeed Brahman alone. There is nothing higher than Brahman. Apart from Brahman, there is no world either. Apart from Brahman, I am not I. All is indeed Brahman alone. Other than Brahman, there is no joy. Apart from Brahman, there is no fruit. Apart from Brahman, there is not a blade of grass. All is indeed Brahman alone. Any state apart from Brahman is a myth. Other than Brahman, there is not a trifle. The world apart from Brahman is illusory. All is indeed Brahman alone. The I apart from Brahman is illusory. Brahman alone am I. Indeed. Other than Brahman, there is no guru. All is indeed Brahman alone. Any action other than Brahman is unreal. The body apart from Brahman is unreal. Apart from Brahman, there is no mind. All is indeed Brahman alone. The world other than Brahman is a myth. Other than Brahman, there is not a bit. Apart from Brahman, there is no egoity. All is indeed Brahman alone. So as you see in those verses of the Ribhu Gita, Ribhu himself goes into a type of meditation of repetition, which was very common in ancient times, because a lot of the stanzas and the verses, the sutras, were always in a repetitive format. And so that would put you in a state of meditation, right? And so that whole chapter, chapter 15, is this constant meditation that Brahman alone is real, right? And so sometimes people, when they read these texts, they get very bored, right? When they read something like the Ribhu Gita. But it puts you in a state of meditation. It down regulates your jiva, right? And allows you to see the world as Brahman itself instead of misperceiving it through a subjective conditioned perspective. It allows you a moment of time, right, to see the world as it truly is. And so most of the time we are not allowed a single second, right, particularly in the modern days, because people play with their phones and computers and create artificial busyness for themselves. There's not even a one iota of silence or peace that allows an individual to rest in their being for 1 second. These texts give you the permission to do that, right? They give you the permission to go deeper into your practice, deeper into your state of Atman. Not even a state, right? But, English, we can only use certain words to indicate to what that is, right? Your natural Atman, right? And so there are many great verses in there, but the constant theme through that chapter is Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, right? Brahman alone is real, the world is an appearance. And so Ribhu is continually driving at that. He's pushing people to abide in the Atman and see the world as it truly is, rather than how we think it actually is, right? And so the last verse, right? The world other than Brahman is a myth. So this goes into this idea of an illusionary world. So we have to think about this in a correct manner, right? And so other than Brahman, there is not a bit. Apart from Brahman, there is no egoity. And so you don't want to mistranslate Maya and say that it's illusion, right? It's the illusion that is built because of measurement. That's a technical way we should translate Maya in English. Often when people go into other cultures and this and that, they see a word on face value and they translate it in that way by using a single word, let's say. But Maya is not one of those words, right? The world other than Brahman is a myth because we measure reality and we create the snake in the rope. That's the problem, right? That's what Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya actually means. And that's the state of consciousness that Bhagavan lived in. He lived in that state where he all he perceived was the rope. He understood that the world as a snake is a myth, right? He understood that even his conditioning as a young man, as Venkanta Raman Aya, and the way that he saw the world was itself a myth. It wasn't until his own realization that he could see the world in its correct state, right? And so that is why these sort of scriptures are very important and why we shouldn't shy away from them, right? What else are you going to do? Watch Netflix, play with your phone, all of these things which don't have any meaning and are just basically occupying your time until the day comes, if you know what I mean, right? So you might as well occupy your time with something that has meaning and that will nourish your soul at a deep level. And that's what these texts actually do. And don't think you're above anything else, right? Don't be like one of those superior New Age people who think they're above the scriptures, or they always say it's too analytical, but they themselves are judging by being too analytical. So if you're humble and you're just willing to learn and just to be as yourself, then you'll continue to learn on the path, right? Listening and learning without judging is a way to move forward. A lot of people say, how did I learn a lot of this when I was younger? I never doubted what was said, because who am I to doubt it? I came afresh to the knowledge. What would a young kid from Mackay, North Queensland, Australia, have to say about the greatest teachings in the world? He's only been around for a certain amount of time, right? So it's better to listen and learn. And maybe because I didn't have a solid foundation, that's how I absorbed a lot of this knowledge. So if you don't have a solid foundation of who you are and what you or who you think you are, then you can start to listen and learn, and you also won't put yourself in a superior position like people do in New Age spirituality, right? And so there are so many good chapters in the Ribhu that we went through, right? And the basis of all of it, that Brahman alone is real. I mean, you all pretty much got the picture. And I hope it did put you in a state where you could feel that, right? And like I said earlier, there's reasons why there's such a negation from Ribhu and other scriptures, like even in the Ashtavaraka Gita and the Avadhuta Gita, even the Mandukya Upanishad Kataka, Ashtavaraka, Dattatreya, and Gaudapada and Shankara, they go through a process of negation, of negating the world, right? And it's not, as I said, that the world is illusory per se, but how we see it, right? So that's what the negation is about. It's about continually pulling your awareness away from the gravitational pull of the external world back within yourself, so you can see the world in its truest sense, right? And so that's why there's a continual negation of the world. And a lot of people read this in the wrong way. So Ribhu thinks that I don't exist, that nothing exists, and so forth and so on. You have to understand Maya. You have to understand Maya in its proper context. He's not saying that you don't exist, literally. He's giving you a roadmap to understand that Atman is Brahman. So he's going through a process of negation. You're even negating the idea of your body and your own mind. so that you come back into that clear state of perception, that clear state of awareness, that non-dual state that you fundamentally are, right? And so then you can move forward and go forward on your life without encountering any obstacles, right? And so that's what this process is about. And there's so many great chapters and verses in the Ribhu Gita. It's a continual meditation. Some of my greatest experiences with such a text has been living in Tiruvannamalai at the foot of Arunachala and just sitting around and reading this. And this is before social media, before people were always on the screens, right? And so those memories are very vivid that I have. And so everything, even in this text, the negation is of even the idea of the self and the non-self, right? So again, Ribhu is saying, get out of even a conceptual framework in a sense for a second, right? Get out of conceptual sense for a second. And then you'll come back into the heart of being, right? And so Brahman alone shines as the world. Brahman alone is as the people also, right? Brahman alone shines as the form. All is indeed Brahman alone. And so this way of thinking, this holistic way of thinking, what Jiddu Krishnamurti said, holarchic thinking, is our natural state of consciousness. Jiddu Krishnamurti actually went into a deep dive into this idea where he talks about how the sense of I is limited, right? Because everything is framed through a subjective perspective, which itself is limited. The ego is limited. Your subjective view of the world is limited because everything is framed through your conditioning, right? And so because we live like that, we find security in division. We find security in the tribe. We find security in the in-group, so to speak. We don't want to be a yogi or a sadhu and, go beyond the pale of society. But Jiddu was mentioning this because real security itself is not in division. It's in understanding who you truly are, right? Division itself is fundamentally insecure. So when we see the world from a limited perspective, because the I, remember the I, the me, the mine is limited. The holarchic thinking is what is true, right? Brahman alone shines as the world. Can we perceive that, right? That Brahman alone shines as the world. And so it's about a state of perception, right? It's about an evolved state of perception, which I speak about actually in my book, The Science and Practice of Humility, the evolution of perception. I talk about two primary states in my book, The Science and Practice of Humility, the warrior and the sage. And basically, most of us are the warrior because we're living life through the subjective perspective. And we're caught in the chaos, right? We are caught in the chaos and we can't see the world from above, which is a sage's state of perception, right? They can see order in what we think is chaos. And that's, again, seeing Brahman and everything. And so in saying that, I want to give you a blast from the past, right? A video that was taken in 2014 when I was living in Tiruvannamalai, where it was just after my book, The Science and Practice of Humility, was published. And so I discuss this dichotomy between the warrior and the sage. And after this, we will get to all of your questions. So make sure you put your questions in. And I just want to highlight Melissa. Thank you very much, Melissa. For all of you who don't know, Melissa will be joining me and Guy Young on the Thailand tour in just a few weeks. We love and appreciate you, my friend. Thank you for all your support over the years. We can't wait to embrace you with a big bear hug. So guys, I'm going to show you this video, and then after it, make sure you keep the questions coming as it's going, and then we'll get into a deep dive in the Q&A.
In the science and practice of humility, one of the central themes is how to see a latent order in what we believe is chaos. Now, around us here in Tiruvannamalai at the moment, all we see on this level, on the ground of existence, is chaos. We believe it's separate, and this is all we believe it is happening. In my book, I symbolize this through two primary states of awareness, where you have the warrior state of consciousness and the sage's state of consciousness, which are two levels of perception. Now, all the warrior sees is what I was mentioning, is the chaos around us, everything that's happening here on the ground level, on this level of perception. All we see is the detail of what's going on. Now, this not only means on the physical sphere, it also means within our mind. It also means within the beliefs we have, the concepts we have, the images, and ultimately our own personal agenda, which leads to our own personal opinion, which ultimately leads to more chaos and to actually a crazy chaos in the form of war and conflict and so forth and so on. Now, different to this, what the sage sees is an intrinsic rhythm to this chaos. They see actually a harmony, but not from this level of existence, not from the ground here. They see an intrinsic rhythm and harmony from a higher level of perception. Now, in Eastern philosophy, in the mystical tradition of Hinduism, this is symbolized by Brahma, the creator God, who has the inhalation and the exhalation of Brahma, which is referring to the contraction and the expansion of consciousness. Now, what that means is that when our consciousness is contracted, we are caught in the detail of life around us. The detail, what we believe is separate and everything. Now, the expansion is a way of evolving your perception to a higher level to see what the sage sees, to see the order, the harmony, the rhythm, that everything itself is not separate but actually unified. Now, in the Western tradition, there is also the evidence of this, which is the same as the breath of Brahma. We find this in Gnosticism and in Hermeticism, where they speak about the involution and evolution of consciousness. The involution is actually to be involved in the detail again, to be caught, your mind caught in the detail of worldly dramas, of worldly events. And the evolution is evolving the consciousness to that level that a sage sees, where they see the order and the actual harmony to what we believe is chaos around us. So what the sage seeks to do is not to keep their perception caught in the ground of detail here. They begin to purge out their beliefs, their opinions, and ultimately their personal agenda of life, because they know that if they have their own personal agenda, then what this chaos is, it just leads to more chaos, and it just never ends. It's a perpetual cycle. So to articulate this, what we see behind us is the temple of Shiva and the holy mountain of Arunachala in the town of Tiruvannamalai. Now, what we see from the ground here is we see chaos on the ground here from the temple of Shiva level. But the sage, on the other hand, what the sage sees is from the state of where Arunachala is. It's an evolved perception. So what we believe is going on here, to a sage, is actually not true. To them, what is truly going on is this. So this is the reality according to a sage. This is their state of perception, which is completely different to the warrior whose mind is caught in the detail of worldly dramas of life, the endless suffering. From this vantage point, what do we see? We see that life is tranquil, serene, silent. You see a beautiful order to what's happening around us here. Now, the warrior may ask, is my state of perception wrong? Because I don't see this order. All I see is the chaos, the detail, and so forth and so on. We need to get out of the idea of right and wrong here, because there are two primary states of awareness in the world, the warriors and the sage. You either have one or the other. The only thing is that if you have your mind focused on enlightenment, on complete liberation in this world, then you need to, in the end, work into the warrior mind and begin to transcend all of your own personal agendas and opinions of the world. Otherwise, you'll just keep contributing to chaos. If you begin to start taking and evolving your perception out of the warrior mind, out of the detail, then you'll begin to have what is called the Zen mind in Japanese, which is a way of seeing directly into reality, seeing the order and what we believe is chaos. Now, Adi Shankara speaks about this when he talks about Brahman, Brahman being the ultimate reality. And he said a beautiful phrase when he was mentioned Brahman, and he said, Brahman is real, the universe is unreal, and the universe is Brahman. Now, this may seem contradictory, almost paradoxical, but the last line, the universe is Brahman, explains the first two, meaning that from the warrior state of perception, you are defining the world, you are measuring the world according to your own beliefs and your own agendas. And all this does is lead to more chaos and more chaos. But from the sage state of perception, all they see is Brahman. All they see is the ultimate reality. And only when you see that, according to a sage, does the universe become real. Actually, it's perfect in a sense, when you see this Brahman. And this perfection was questioned once by a disciple to a Zen monk, because the Zen monk told the disciple that the universe is perfect. Doesn't matter how you think about it or what you believe, the universe is perfect. The disciple said, but all I see is war and discord. I see all of the suffering that people have. How can you say it's perfect? And then the Zen monk said that what you believe is war and discord on this level, actually from a higher level, is perfect and harmonious. What you need to ask yourself is what mind got us into the state of war in the first place? Not whether you believe it's good or bad, what state of mind got us there? And so the disciple was taken back because the Zen monk explained to him it was the warrior state of mind. How can we heal all of our problems in the world by having our perception caught in the detail without seeing reality as it truly is? And this is what the Zen monk was explaining to the disciple. You need to evolve your perception to be able to see Brahman and see reality as it truly is, or you'll continue to see the world as you want it to be, which is the false state of perception.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that blast from the past there. Looking a bit younger, a bit thinner. But I hope you enjoyed that, where I was discussing the warrior and the sage state of awareness, the two primary states of awareness that most people live through, that I discussed in the Science and Practice of Humility, which kind of lends to what we've been speaking about today with Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, and seeing that that Brahman alone is real and the world is an appearance, right? And so I hope you enjoyed that little snippet from 2014 when I was living in Tiruvannamalai, 2014, 2015 actually. And so looking a lot younger. So guys, let's open it up for questions. Make sure you provide some good questions and we'll go into it. And if there are no questions, then that will be it. So let's have a look at the chat. Who do we have here? Another actual person who's coming on the Thailand tour, Andrew Frandel. Andrew, thank you, brother. Thank you for being here. I can't wait to finally meet you in a few weeks. It's going to be an awesome tour and trip. We've actually got a lot of Patreons who we've known for a long time who are actually coming on the Thailand tour. So it's going to be so good, this tour. Lyle, nice hoodie. Thank you, Lyle. Appreciate it. Hello from Ohio, USA. Where is everyone coming from today who's watching? We've got 36 in the room. Give the video a thumbs up, if you will, which allows this live stream to get to the people it needs to get to. And if you have a super chat or anything like that, that'll go to the top of the queue. But hopefully you've got some good questions. David Mickles, nice to see you. It's super late for me. I got to be up early. Sorry, my friend. There's no real good time for these live streams. You always piss somebody off and you can't make everybody happy. So I'm Ranfrin. I don't know how to say that. Then there is Uwe, which is something just being even while in action. That's right. That's right. Excellent. Tideswell said, before clicking this video, a realization came to me that went like, don't chase, don't attract, just only be. And that is the way. That is the way. But it's about, as the other individual is saying, finding that state of Uwe in your life and calibrating with the world, because you are not operating through that subjective lens, right? That's what that ultimate calibration is. It's, you know, again, using that river analogy that I use in my new book, The Tradition of Natural Taoism. When you let go of the banks of the river and stop firing the current of the river, your power becomes the river's power. And that's basically what Brahman is, right? When you're living in this little box in your head and you think that that's what reality is, it's only from repetitive suffering that hopefully we all realize that we're living in a box, right? And so let's have a look. Titus, Alabama, but I live in Texas. Nice to see you. SJ Waves, greetings from the west coast of Scotland. Beautiful. David Mickles from Seattle. Awesome. Dharmaputra from Bali. Beautiful. Burro Supreme, Albany. Love it. Obviously, Andrew, Alberta. I love it. I can't wait to see you too, brother. It's going to be awesome. So Andrew's got a question here. What do we have? Is the reason to go into a long period of silence like Ramana did so that we are better able to perceive reality as it really is? Definitely, brother. Definitely. This is the truth, right? Like, yeah, Ramana didn't speak actually for 7 years, I think, on Arunachala, where he lived in Skanda ashram. I've been to that ashram. And it's about getting out of getting out of the intellect, getting out of the ability to always be attracted to the idea of, you know, this or that, right? These are like thought forms, right? Vikalpas in Sanskrit. So a vikalpa is basically a thought form, right? And the great sages, they go beyond vikalpa, right? And so there's no surprise that this type of state that Bhagavan was in, because of that silence, is termed nirvikalpa samadhi. So nir meaning no thought forms, basically the destruction of thought forms, or we could say vasanas, our tendencies, our usual habits, because we've stopped acting on them, right? So to be in that silence, right, you're ceasing for however long you'll be in that silence to act on what you are thinking, right? And so that has a profound effect. And actually they talk about this not just, you know, in Hinduism, but it's also in Buddhism and Taoism. You know, in the Buddhist tradition, like if we look at the traditional vipassana, right, insight meditation, wasn't just Goenka's insight meditation where you go into a monastery for 10 days and you don't talk. There is that as well. But the traditional vipassana could go on for, you know, 30 days, 10 years and so forth and so on. So the whole point is to get you out of this habit of acting on thought forms, vikalpas. And so you're not then reacting to everything that's going on within your mind. Even though you might think, oh man, that's a brilliant idea I got there, but even that you're rejecting in a sense, right? Now, there's probably a limit to that. Hence, Bhagavan himself, he came out of that silence after 7 years, probably because he got to such a stage where the vikalpas and his own personal vasanas, his own tendencies and this that didn't have a strong power over him. Because when you're acting like that, you're getting into your subconscious, into your samskaras in Sanskrit, and these are sometimes the only techniques to get down into that, right? Because a lot of people say, oh, I want to work on my subconscious. How can I transform what's in my subconscious? Well, sometimes the methods have to be extreme. It's not just simply like moving a few things around, getting the removalist over. We all know it doesn't work like that because sometimes old habits die hard, right? And so being in that silence for a certain amount of time is what is important to really transform what's in the subconscious. And once you start to transform what's in the subconscious, then the vikalpas start to loosen their grip. They start to disappear a little bit, right? And this is what that state of no vikalpa is, of no thought forms or thought constructs, we could say. So they use thought forms because thoughts are thought of as even an object themselves, right? Because there's something that we can perceive. Because a thought form comes in our mind and we can perceive it. And so it's not something we should act upon, right? And so that's the point of the silence. I don't believe you need to go somewhere for 7 years. And I also don't believe in a sense that all thought forms are negative. The problem is how our thinking is a master over our being, right? And that's the problem. Once our thinking makes us a hostage to its own will, that's when a lot of us suffer. But when you have complete control of your mind and you can see the thought forms as you see a cloud in a clear blue sky, that's when you're completely free of them. Because thoughts don't cease. Even for someone like Ramana, thoughts didn't cease. They just didn't have any more control over it because he was abiding as the Atman. And so he could just see these clouds just coming back and forth. Maybe his mind was not so overcast like probably the modern mind. The modern mind is completely overcast and people don't even know there's a sky nor a sun. So that unfortunately becomes the way a lot of people operate in the world. And so that's why this silence is important. And something like Vipassana is also good. You're going for a 10-day Vipassana can help you down-regulate those thought forms, those vikalpas. So that's pretty much what it's about, Andrew. That's pretty much what it's about. Can't wait to see you, brother. Cleveland, Ohio in the house. Self-Hunter. Where can I read more about the relationship of the Bindu or Turiya? There's a few places. But I would say the best places to read about Bindu or Turiya is probably in Kashmir Shaivism, in the Trika system. And I would highly recommend something like the Shiva Sutras, the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, Spandakarika, all of the great texts in Kashmir Shaivism. I wish I had them with me now. They're downstairs. I don't want to just leave the stream. But they go into the Bindu, the tree Bindu, the Turiya, the 4 stages of consciousness. Actually, Turiya, obviously, one of the best places to read about this is in the Upanishads, right? So the Upanishads is probably the best place to read about the 4 states of consciousness, right? Waking, dreaming, deep dreamless sleep state of consciousness, and the 4th, Turiya, right? Actually, if you notice when we were going through the verses of the Ribhu Gita, Ribhu just casually mentions the 4th, So sometimes when you're not schooled in what that means, it can be completely different, completely like illogical, like because people don't know what he is referring to. Sometimes the translation should probably have a little bit of a footnote, let's say, and they're referring to Turiya as the fourth. And so, but they're the best places, South Hunter. I would say also have a look at Mandukya Upanishad Kataka, which is both by Gaudapada and Shankara, a commentary on that Upanishad. And that's one of the most important Upanishads in all of the Upanishads, and in a sense builds the whole premise of Advaita Vedanta, because Gaudapada himself was a real strict non-dualist in the sense that we were talking about with Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, right? He like, this is illusion, negate in the mind, negate the body, so forth and so on. The constant negation so that you get back towards the Atman. Shankara would differ a little bit. He's a little softer in his approach. And then obviously when we get to Ramakrishna and Vivekananda, they're even a little bit softer than Shankara. But to be honest, what comes after Gaudapada is more so Vijnana Vedanta, which is more so integral Advaita, which I think is more getting closer to how reality actually really is, which is close to the Trika system, which is close to Vishishtadvaita, which is qualified non-dualism, which is not a rejection of the reality, but an embrace of it as Shakti, as the power of Shiva, right? And so in Kashmiri Shaivism, there's a view of bhoga. So bhoga in Sanskrit means enjoyment. Once you understand the nature of yourself, once you are liberated, then you are free to enjoy, right? There's not the negation. You don't have an urge to become a sadhu on the street. You continue to live your life as you will, and you enjoy the sweet nectar of the universe, what it has to offer, right? And I think this integral approach is actually more non-dualistic than probably non-dualism, right? Because you're not negating the world per se. But again, this comes back to an understanding of what I mentioned earlier with Maya, right? And so that's what is important. So guys, make sure you keep your questions coming. We've got 37 in the room. Give it a like. Get it to the people who needs to see it. David Mickle says, question, do you have a regular practice like mantra or dream yoga? I don't practice dream yoga. Haven't done so for a long time. Regular practice for myself is basically Vipassana and Zen open awareness meditation. And also I practice Tai Chi Chuan. Now Tai Chi Chuan I've practiced for a while, but it's kind of more of a hobby. I don't really think of it as anything grandeur. You know, a lot of people may exaggerate their spiritual practice. I never try to exaggerate my spiritual practice. It's just something I do daily, like going to the toilet, you know. So meditation's that much a part of my life. And so that's basically what I do every morning and in the evening practice, obviously depending on travel schedules and whatnot. As for mantra, yes, I do practice mantra. There are a few short mantras that I recite, nothing too grandiose, right? I'm not into a lot of the modern day mantraism, if you will. Just more of a silent mantra to my own shrine that I have downstairs and everything like that. And so nothing grandiose, more so as you develop, your practice kind of blends into your life. This is what happens, right? So there's not really a hard distinction between your life and your practice. This is where you got to get to. So that's, I think, the challenge for most spiritual aspirants is when the spiritual practice bleeds into their life. That's where you want to get to. And that's why I love doing all of this. It's not, for me, it's not effort. Reading the scriptures is not effort. Teaching you guys is not effort. Living my life is not effort. Going for a walk is not an effort. And all of that, right? None of it is an effort. It's not a labor. Everything that I do is, you could say, is a labor of love. And so that's where we all have to get to. It's getting out of that. Now, as for dream yoga, I would say that for that type of practice, you've got to be really careful about who you learn from, right? Who you learn from, because there are a lot of charlatans out there, as I'm sure you know, David, and a lot of people do lead you down the garden path. Now, my introduction to dream yoga, let's say, was through Vajrayana Buddhism, and so through lucid dreaming, and that's what I was introduced to that tradition for. Is it something that I care to do? No. And I think that it's very difficult to get a lot of genuine teachers these days involved in it, unless you go to Nepal or you go to places like that, Ladakh maybe, in northern India, that there are still teachers who do teach dream yoga in its proper context, right? But there's a lot of wishy-washy things out there, as I'm sure you know. But so it's not really my cup of tea, but each to their own. All right, boom, we got a super chat in the house. Thank you, Keith. I appreciate it, brother. Thank you a lot. Keith says in air quotes, a dunce once searched for fire with a lit lantern. Had he known what fire is, he could have cooked his rice much sooner. Loving the new book, Jason. I'm about halfway through. Thanks, Keith. I love that. That's basically how we're living life, right? We're going through our life with the lantern thinking, where's this fire at? If only. I'm glad you are enjoying the book. For those of you who don't have my new book, hopefully you can go out and get yourself a copy of The Tradition of Natural Taoism. It helps me immensely if you can go out and get yourself a copy. And yeah, anyway, for those of you who have read it, feel free to ask any questions below and we'll get into it. E. Kortomonic said, can we please see your shrine one day? Not sure. Usually those things are best kept for yourself, I would say. But yeah, sure, maybe, possibly. So guys, anyone got any more questions? Fire away. Joe Ross said, what do you think of Japanese new religions like Tenrikyo? I don't really know what that is, my friend. I haven't been paying attention. Maybe you can enlighten me on that, but I don't really know much about those new traditions. Keith said that quote from Zen Flesh, Zen Bones, just for reference. I love that. Going to go out and steal that quote immediately. And David said, I agree about being careful with teachers. Now, this is a big thing. And, I've always wanted to make a video about this because there's so many charlatans, particularly in the modern internet space, we could say, not just on YouTube, they're everywhere. And a lot of them are not schooled in the traditions. A lot of them don't really have any background with these traditions. And it's easy just to pick up a camera and start making videos and you can sound as eloquently as possible. But I remember a teacher in India once said to me, test them with the Brahmajnana. See really where they're at. Or test them with from the Taoist tradition, they'd say, test them with some of the Zhuangxian knowledge. Because if they really understand this knowledge, they'll be able to, elucidate their views by having a broad context and framework of spiritual knowledge. It's not just all happens just on themselves. You got to remember, Ramana himself came from a Brahmin family, his uncles were Brahmins, and they were always reciting the Vedas and the Upanishads and everything, and he was always around them, and so he would always be listening to them, and this is probably sort of what tilled the soil and evoked his own self-realization. Whereas these days, people think if they're on YouTube or something like that, they think they're self-realized because they just start making videos and they just copy what someone had said, right? And they sound cool and so forth, so on. Which you don't really want to go down that rabbit hole. So guys, any more questions there? Get myself a drink of water. Star Captain in the house. Star Captain says, Jason, thanks for the live. Enjoyed the meditation a lot. Thank you, Star Captain. I appreciate you, my friend. E. Kotomak said, I got effortless living a couple of months ago, but I was bloody busy this semester with things like animation homework. Your book is definitely on the list for 2026. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. I'd love to hear what you think of effortless living. All right, guys, it seems as though if you got any more questions, please shoot them off. I'm not ready to go just yet, but if you want to, if it's going to be quiet, namaste. Jose, my brother in the house. Good to see you, man. Next, Hendrix said, I bought your book, but haven't started it yet. I also read Spiritual Freedom in the Digital Age and enjoyed it. Thank you, my friend. David said, thank you for your teaching, Jason. Thank you, David. Love and appreciate you, my friend. Jose, likewise. Thank you, brother. So, guys, like I was mentioning to you before, and Susan says, glad to see you're doing lives again. Guys, would you like me to do more lives? I actually enjoy making these. I enjoy connecting with you guys. What a realistic target would be probably one a month for me at the moment with everything. I'm planning on writing a new book after the Thailand tour. And so at the moment in January, I'm probably going to take just a little bit of time to relax and so forth and so on before the tour and before getting back into writing. So would you guys enjoy more of these lives? What time would you like them? Please leave a comment below. I enjoy these. I enjoy making some content for you guys like this and then connecting with you about it. I hope you all enjoyed the meditation we did from the Ribhu Gita. I hope that helped you a lot. And so, yeah, like if you would like, I would love to hear that. Jose said, yes, sir, brother. Thank you. Both David and Melissa, I'm guessing, are giving me the thumbs up for the live stream. So yeah, guys, make sure you go out and grab yourself a copy of my new book if you can. If you're interested in getting some exclusive content, go over to my Patreon and join the Patreon during the Shanti Sangha. We've got a great gang over there. These live streams I'm going to keep up. I used to take these live streams down and just put them exclusively on Patreon, but I will keep these on my channel for you to watch at a later time. And I think I will start doing a monthly live stream like this for you guys because it seems as though a lot of you enjoy it. So that makes me happy. Keith said, yes, I love catching you live. They are very enjoyable and there are great people in the chat to have a great conversation with. What I really like about the conversation, guys, is in the chat, usually you get a lot of trolls, you get a lot of, people who are just out there causing trouble, but we have I don't know why, but my esteemed audience are obviously very respectful and sincere, which is something that I'm very proud of personally. Susan said, I've been reading and studying Ramana. His teachings have changed my life in ways I can't articulate. Well, that's the effect he usually has. I remember when I read him when I was younger, and it was like, it's like being hit with a baseball bat. To be honest, well, one of the first scriptures I ever read was the Avadutta Gita. I've shared this with people before, and I don't know why when I was young that made sense to me. I just thought, why does this make like complete sense? But if I gave it to my friend, it's completely gobbledygook, right? And so after reading the Avadutta Gita, naturally I was drawn to Ramana. And so, you read Be As You Are, you kind of absorb it, whatever was out there. And this is kind of almost before YouTube and everything like this, right? So your only way back then was through books, and little there was on the internet at that time, or actually going to Tiruvannamalai, which I did. And so I think most of us are grateful that we've found Ramana, at that point in our life that we needed to find, right? So that's why I always highly recommend Be As You Are, edited by David Godman, is one of the best books you can ever read. It's kind of a PhD in Advaita, you can say. Ramana kind of extracts all of the knowledge that we've been talking about, the Avadutta and the great texts like the Ribhu Gita, the Avadutta Gita, the Ashtavakra, and everything like that, and then just puts it on an easily digestible way for us, which makes it good. Maybe Sundays would be better since more would have the day off. E. Kurtamuk said, if any of you concur with that, please let me know. Yes, please. SJ Waves, yes, please. It's all been very helpful. Thank you for being here. David said, Avadutta, Ashtavakra, and Ribhu are the top 3 non-dual texts in my opinion. Well, I would not disagree with you there, brother. That's for sure. I would probably throw in the Mandukya Upanishad Kataka as a 4th, but I would say that those 4 texts, if you're really interested in Advaita and non-dualism, important to read. But I would say contrast that also with Kashmir Shaivism. So then you get a different view of sort of not just Gaudapada's way of non-duality, but seeing it from more of the Kashmir Shaiva's way of sort of this integral oneness as well. And I mentioned in the end of year video that it's important to have manana, right? The contemplative mind. So after Shravana, after you've grasped the text and this and that, now it's time to contemplate it. But having that contemplative mind, that manana, is what is important, right? Because you're not a fundamentalist. You don't see things one way. You come from different ways, and this contributes to your understanding, deepens your knowledge on it, right? But even with all of the different perspectives, say in Sanatana Dharma, the main view is liberation, right? It's moksha. But how do we get there, or how do we understand that? That's where the differences come. So it's good to get different angles. And this is what actually leads to nididhyasana, non-dual meditation, which is important. Because you're not seeing it from one way. And as I mentioned in my 2026 video for 2026, which I put out last week, if you haven't watched that, I highly recommend go on and have a look at that. But I mentioned that a lot of us have the Abrahamic hangover, right? So with the Abrahamic hangover, what is it? It means you have to see the world one way. You can never question it. You can never look at things from different angles. That will enrich your understanding. I have met people who are from the Abrahamic faiths who do look at things from different angles. Think of Thomas Merton, the great sage he was, right? He was a Trappist monk, but he looked at reality through different angles, different lenses. He wrote a great book about Zhuangzi, paraphrase Zhuangzi, right? The way of Zhuangzi it is. It's kind of like an introduction, I would say, to Zhuangzi before you actually read the proper text. But it's a really enlightening read. So he was not drunk from the traditions of the Abrahamic faiths, and so he didn't really encounter this Abrahamic hangover. He saw the traditions for what they are, and so that's what's important. And so to have manana is to see things from different angles. I remember this Indian teacher once said, it's kind of funny. He didn't mean this literally, but he kind of just to get an idea of manana and sort of the general Indian ethos. He said, you know, us Indians, we're like healthy schizophrenics because your mind's not really made up, right? You haven't said, this is it, because it's in the non-dwelling mind, not dwelling under any philosophy, under any belief system, allowing your mind to be non-dwelling. That's how you understand the non-dualness, or that oneness is the only reality. Once you fix a house and you build a house and you have a dwelling over you and you say, this is it, this is me, that's when you're lost. And so being that healthy schizophrenic, as that Indian teacher said, it's about looking at things from different angles. It allows you to enrich your being, but you remain in that non-dwelling mind, right? And what's that non-dwelling mind? That non-dwelling mind is the Atman, is abiding in that undifferentiated state of consciousness, not giving yourself a form, right? And so that's what we do. We try to fix our mind. We try to fix our mind and we give ourselves a form. This is Jason. This is who I am. But, you know, as you live your life, you tend to change, because change is constant. Change is the essence of Brahman itself. But we try to fix ourselves and we say, this is who I am. And this actually didn't exist before the King of Kings traditions. So if we look at the Abrahamic faiths, right, they are part of the King of Kings traditions, which goes back to Darius I and before him, Akhenaten, right? When we had all the pagan traditions through Europe, through Africa, South America, North America, everywhere basically were like Hinduism. The Hinduism itself is the longest enduring culture and tradition in the world. And that was probably due to its population, and a lot of the pagan European traditions got run over by Christianity because they were a smaller population. But a lot of them were polytheists in the sense that they had many gods framed through an ultimate substratum and were nature-based. And so that is part of that tradition that got completely run over. And so it's good to get out of that Abrahamic hangover, have manana, and see the world through different perspectives. And that enriches your being, right? But can you remain in the non-dwelling being? That's can you have that open consciousness? You know, in Dzogchen, in Vajrayana Buddhism, it's all about remaining in the non-dwelling. They don't even really give you a certain, let's say, articulate framework for that, but you understand Rigpa, right? That pristine awareness. And then you understand the Dhammadhatu, right? The Dhammadhatu is that kind of substratum. Melissa said, Be As You Are is a great read. It definitely is a great read. It's a book that I've continually had on me for a long, long time. Susan said, Ramesh Balaskar is also a great teacher. Yes, he was a great teacher. He really was. He actually wrote a book called, now I might be getting the title wrong, but Advaita, Zen, and Tao. It was basically a non-dual book about those non-dual traditions. And it was actually a really brilliant read. And he was a great teacher. There is no doubt about it. And yes, Ramesh, he was the translator for Nisargadatta. And I believe he was a direct disciple of him, if maybe I'm wrong there. And Susan also said, Abrahamic hangover, I am stealing that. And also Keith said, again, the Abrahamic hangover. Well, it is a good name, actually. Actually, that is a good idea for a book. I might get roasted continually by the Abrahamic traditions, that's for sure. Jose said, coming from an Abrahamic tradition takes a lot of untangling the influence of the doctrine. There is no doubt about it, brother. There is no doubt. Even if we look at the Western tradition in general, I actually mention, I allude to a little bit about this in my book, The Tradition of Natural Taoism, that even an atheist in the West is somewhat influenced by the Abrahamic traditions. So they have that Abrahamic hangover because their state of perception, their state of seeing the world is through that particular lens, right? And they just say, I don't believe in God, but your whole makeup is built on an Abrahamic doctrine. Susan said, recovering from conservative Christian indoctrination is similar to recovering from an abusive relationship. It can be like that. It can be like that. And I've also seen this with recovering Muslims as well. SJ said, yes, that's it. It's a healthy schizophrenic is the way forward. Yeah. I wouldn't go around telling anyone that you're a healthy schizophrenic. That's for damn sure. But here we can keep it copacetic. So Melissa said, so true, Susan. David, Sundays, well said. If you guys think Sundays is a good day for the live stream, let me know. I never really know what's the best day for people. I know people have days off all the time in different days and so forth. Jose, namaste, Melissa. Absolutely, Jason. Jose and Melissa are cherished Patreons, cherished friends, been around for a long time. So, guys, that's about it, yeah. Thank you so much for joining the live today. I will plan to do another live at the end of each month, I guess. Susan says, what's your thought about modern non-dual speakers? Now you're trying to get me in trouble. But my thoughts, I would say keep a discerning eye, have a good BS detector. I always say to people, like, try to understand their fluency with kind of this divine language we are talking with, but not just the terms and the Sanskrit we're using, the Chinese or whatever, but you know, how much of, as that teacher in India said to me, how much of the Brahma Jnana or the Brahma Vidya do they know, the knowledge of Brahman, right? Or are they just sort of waxing lyrical because they read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, right? And so you see a lot of teachers, they might just read that type of book and then they go around paraphrasing what they read in that, but it's not a real deep experience, right? And so you've also got to see originality in how they present the teachings, right? A lot of people these days, with a lot of non-dual speakers these days, are so predictable, where they will sit in the satsang, in air quotes, and then they do the turning clown mouth festival trick. You know those turning where they do this before the satsang to, in their mind, to exhibit that they're the Atman. Now, if you really were that, it's not performative. So for me, that's a dead giveaway. When you see someone just stare for like 5-10 minutes and do this, it's a direct indication that they're trying to sort of assert their superiority. Now, I don't know if some of these people weren't loved by their mother or father, or they have a lot of psychological problems, but I was loved by my mother and father. So I don't have those problems. So I'm free to be who I am. And if people don't like me, then that's okay. I'm okay with that as well. But when you start to see the turning clown head posture, that's when you know you should sort of get up off the meditation cushion, exit the premises, and, you know, probably just go and have a conversation with the average Joe on the street, and you probably learn a bit more. to be honest, because a teacher should be humble, should be personable. All of the great teachers I've met, particularly in India and throughout Asia, have always been characters, real characters. You know, they can have a laugh, but then they can change gears and they can just drop a pearl of wisdom on you. It's not like one way or the other. And that's part of the problem. Is that's also the Abrahamic hangover, right? It's either this way or that way. So now I'm a non-dual teacher. So now I'm going to embody my festival clownness. And everyone's like, Om Namah Shivaya, like if you're naive, you know. So I know most of you here on the channel and this and that don't vibe with that. I don't vibe with that. And you can, if you've got a sharpened BS detector, you will know that that's not genuine and not true. So that's something for us to think about. But you got to, once you start listening to them, how much can they articulate about what non-duality or what the knowledge of non-duality is, and are they truly kind and helpful, or are they more interested in asserting their superiority over the devotees and thinking that they are above them? These are the things that you have to think about. So David, Jose, lol, yes. E-Chromatic, yeah, lol, I've never seen that. I'd probably uncontrollable laugh. It is true. It is hard to believe sometimes. And David said, honest, genuine, personable, accessible are keys, I believe. That is true. And that is really what is a genuine teacher, right? I've always made myself as accessible as I possibly can to people, and I've never, ever thought that I was above anyone. And maybe that's my Australian upbringing, because in Australia, we have a thing called tall poppies. So Americans often term this tall poppy syndrome, right? But it's not really a syndrome. It's a sort of a state of keeping people in check, right? And so it's not that, see, this is, in America, when they talk negatively about Australia, about tall poppy syndrome, they think that we just want to chop people down because they are excelling. It's not that. We want people to succeed in life. We want people to be all that they can. But when you start verbalizing and telling people how good you are and this and that, that's when you'll get cut down, right? So there's not any of that sort of sass on top. And so because I was raised in that type of culture, I don't really have a desire to be above other people, maybe. And maybe in other people from other European cultures or American or this and that have a desire to be above other people. And I'm perfectly comfortable in being a nobody, So though I'm very grateful that I have this esteemed audience, I've made the connections I have, and I have the ability to articulate these teachings for you and my own personal spiritual path that I've been on for a long time. So I'm eternally grateful for that, but I'm not also going to go and tell you about a wonderful story about how I was self-realized and this and that. This is a dead giveaway. I'll tell you a short story, right? When I first wrote my first book, and I had been teaching for a long time before. It's done lectures around the world. This is, sort of on the cusp of when YouTube was starting. I won't mention names, but notable people said to me, well, if you're going to be in the public eye, you've got to curate a good enlightenment story. You have to be able to tell a story. And I thought, what are these people talking about? Best-selling authors too. I'm talking about best-selling authors. And I said, to hell with that. I can only be myself, and I'm not going to lie, and I'm not going to cheat or steal. And in the same vein, they told me I needed to sound like a Northern Californian because that's the universal language, apparently. And I said, well, I ain't doing that either. So maybe that's why I haven't been super successful. I don't sound like a Northern Californian, and I don't have a fake enlightenment story. And so I would always be wary of that. You know, a lot of teachers will open up with a story, an enlightenment story they have. And it's like, why do you all have stories? A lot of the time, people's own personal realization comes about just from living life, studying the scriptures, deepening that knowledge within themselves. And then you begin to develop naturally to the point where you become realized. It's not something that just, oh yeah, I'm enlightened now. Now I've got 1,000 stories about it. So that's not what it is. So remember, always, as Sean Phillips says in the comments, it's called humility. That's right. It's really called humility. And a lot of people, they miss the point. They miss the point. And so Ecotex said, a good teacher is also funny and easy to chill out with and enjoy a cup of chai with you. That's right. That's truly. And as I said, all of the great teachers I've met are the ones who can just sit down and be themselves, have a laugh. I've sat talking with teachers in India, and we talk about cricket for like half an hour. Completely frivolous, but their mind is not dwelling. It's a non-dwelling mind. They can easily move with the transformations of life. Remember, Zhuangzi's advice for people is to move efficaciously with the transformations of life. When you don't, that's when you're operating from the ego, right? So you move with the transformations of life. You don't make a game of it. Oh, I can never talk about cricket again. That's forbidden. I'm spiritual now, in air quotes. Again, you made spirituality an object of knowledge, and it is not an object. And Keith said, a good teacher is not only humble and also has no attachment to being liked, they are also able to be slightly harsh or to tell truth when necessary. Not mean, just authentic and honest. That is true. That is so true. And that's something that, you know, personally, I've never shied away from. You don't want to be overly harsh. You don't want to be a complete a-hole. But when you know BS and you can see it, there's nothing wrong with saying that that's BS, right? The problem with a lot of, particularly Western Buddhism, is it's become completely mad with moral ethics, the moral code, according to usually let's be honest, that's sort of a liberal view of what it should be, even though when you go into Asia, the Buddhist traditions are far more conservative. And I didn't even want to say conservative, right? Because again, the West frames things through conservative and liberal, where the world is just normal, but then being normal is somehow conservative, right? So the Asian Buddhist traditions are just normal. It's just that that's always been the way that they are. But the American Buddhists or the European Buddhists have taken on this ideology, and they work through that ideology as their moral code. And so that is a dead giveaway as to why you should get up off the meditation cushion and walk away, because the Buddha had an impartial mind. It did not operate through an ideology, right? And so, and Melissa says, why do you think that Buddhism has become so political in the US? It's a good question. I have no idea, because I remember Buddhism in America when I was younger, and it was nothing like what it is now. And I would say it's a byproduct of social media and how they've trained people. They've even trained the Buddhists in America, right? No one has been free of that, right? And so they've been trained with that type of thinking. Even though someone may call themselves a Roshi, right, a Zen Roshi, sometimes they are the people who are easily susceptible to brainwashing as well, right? So if they're easily susceptible, then they're going to just start to mimic whatever the tech companies and whatever the media firms and this and that push down people's throats. So if you're free of all that, right, you can teach Buddhism as it truly is. I know the Buddhism that I see here in Thailand when I go down to a temple, it ain't anything like what you see in Santa Fe, if you know who I'm talking about. So Buddhism itself should not be a political instrument. It isn't a political instrument. The traditions that are more political are usually Christianity and Islam, right? They're more politically oriented, where Buddhism is strictly about nirvana, the path to nirvana and attaining nirvana. Whether you believe in this political leaning or that political leaning is completely meaningless, right? And so I remember I saw one of these so-called Buddhist roshis on X, and they were expressing everything that you should express to stay in the good graces of whatever the ideology of the tech companies and the media firms and this and that are, right? And so that's a dead giveaway that they're not really invested in the teachings of the Buddha. They're interested in staying under the good graces of those corporations. And so I would say, Melissa, that everyone, I'd say anyone is susceptible to brainwashing and being easily indoctrinated. And so it hasn't been like that in Asia, thankfully. But yeah, we could write a whole book about that one, to be honest. Jose says, sharing one's life experience builds connections and trust, humility for sure. That's right, Jose. That's right. Having those honest connections. You and I have spoke personally together, and we have that connection, and that's what is important. LA7079 said, thanks for everything, Jason. I need to go. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. David said, I don't like teachers who have an inner circle that protects them from new students. Yeah, that's an absolute strange phenomenon that I've seen throughout time, to be honest. There's nothing wrong with having sort of like close students, you could say, but like having an inner circle or like a group of people who work as the guru's PR agent, you could say, is a strange phenomenon. Keith said, bullseye, thank you, my friend. Jose said, absolutely. Guys, I love and appreciate you all. I wish you all the best 2026. Got a lot of new content coming out. Might take a little bit of a break in January, just a tiny break to, rest and recuperate and get ready for the Thailand tour. We got a great group of people coming. Melissa says, thanks for your answer. It makes sense to me having grown up in the US. Yes, for sure, Melissa, for sure. And I was going to say, I don't know what it's like in Australia, but I'm pretty sure Buddhism in Australia is probably pretty similar. So, but for some reason, I see mainly what's happening in the States, even more so than Europe, to be honest. So, Melissa, same to you. See you soon. Yeah, I can't wait to see you. Jose, blessings, brother. Man, I wish you were coming. I can't wait to speak with you again. SJ, thank you for everything. And yeah, awesome. So guys, we'll leave it off there. I'll leave you guys with some beautiful quotes from Bhagavan about Arunachala. So you can meditate on what you're about to see, and that'll lead us off. And I hope you're all safe and sound. And I look forward to seeing you all next year. I will keep you all updated about the next live stream. And so have a great year and keep your family safe. And I'll see you all in the next one.
शिवा अरुणाचल शिवा अरुणाचल शिवा अरुणाचल अरुणा